The unit of brightness that humanity once used to measure all the light around it was defined by a single flame, the combustion of a pure spermaceti candle of a precisely specified weight. This gives us something strange and almost impossible to quite believe. For centuries, people compared the light of distant lanterns, lamps in strangers' windows, and the first streetlights to the burning of a substance extracted from the head of a sperm whale. That same substance was used to lubricate the most precise mechanisms imaginable, things like pocket watches, and its leftovers were rubbed into the skin as an expensive cream kept on the dressing table. It turns out that a creature from the black depths of the ocean was quietly lighting our homes, moving the hands of our clocks, and sitting on a shelf next to the mirror, while we were utterly convinced we knew everything that mattered about it. And what mattered as we saw it could hardly have been simpler. For centuries, the sperm whale was nothing more to us than an enormous, dim-witted barrel of fat that rose from the darkness only to be harpooned and cut apart. But when scientists finally got inside that head and truly listened to what the animal was doing underwater, the familiar picture began to fall apart before their eyes. It turned out that what we had in front of us was a creature far more complex than we had ever allowed ourselves to imagine. And that right now, as you watch this video, sperm whales somewhere in the deep ocean are communicating with one another in a language we've only just begun to piece together, one tiny fragment at a time. I'll be straight with you. By the time you finish this story, you won't be able to look at this animal the way you looked at it before. Let's start with the fact that this monster wasn't invented by anyone, and the first proof of that is hidden in the animal's very name. The word sperm whale traces back to an old term meaning big head, meaning people named it after its strangest feature long before any science existed, simply by looking at what surfaced in front of their boat. And that head belongs to a genuine record holder in the natural world. The sperm whale is the largest of the toothed whales and the biggest toothed predator that has ever lived on this planet. Large males grew to more than 18 and even 20 meters in length and weighed over 50 tons, though finding giants like that today is nearly impossible because the biggest animals were the first ones hunted down. It's worth understanding what sets it apart from other whales, since in most people's minds all whales tend to get lumped together into one big category. There are baleen whales, which have no teeth, and instead filter small creatures and plankton through plates of keratin, quietly straining entire tons of water. And then there are toothed whales, and among them the sperm whale stands at the very top. It filters nothing. It dives down into the cold darkness and hunts there, finding its prey in places where not a single ray of sunlight ever reaches. Its body still carries every mark of that alien, inaccessible life. The skin behind its head is folded into deep wrinkles that look like the dried skin of a prune, and it periodically sheds in large ragged strips. Its teeth grow only on the lower jaw, and, when the mouth is closed, fit neatly into sockets on the upper jaw. But here's the most curious part. Those teeth don't fully emerge until the animal reaches adulthood, and young sperm whales catch prey perfectly well without them, simply drawing it in with a powerful surge of water, which means the teeth aren't really there for eating. Adult males fight each other in earnest, and the heads of old veterans are covered in scars from rivals' teeth, like the scratched pages of a very old book. People sensed this hidden power long before any scientific instruments existed, and the ocean would remind them from time to time exactly what they were dealing with. In 1851, in the waters of the Pacific, the whaling vessel Anne Alexander had been pursuing a wounded sperm whale for some time when the animal, instead of fleeing, suddenly turned, rammed the ship with its forehead, and simply sank it. This is no legend, no sailor's yarn told for dramatic effect. It's a documented event, and it happened shortly after a famous novel about an enormous white whale had been published. And if we're being fully honest about that novel, its monster had a very real model, an actual white sperm whale that sailors called Mocha Dick, who was the subject not of a made-up story, but of a serious first-hand account published in the late 1830s. And all this time, the same inconvenient question has hung over the animal. What does it actually need that enormous, ungainly, one-of-a-kind head for? The answer turned out to be completely unexpected. That head is no battering ram and no simple fat reservoir. It's an extraordinarily complex acoustic organ, a living instrument built for precision work with sound. Inside it sits a large spermaceti case, and directly below that is a separate structure made up of multiple oil-filled compartments. Together they function as a genuine acoustic lens, gathering dispersed sound into a single narrow directed beam. And that head can hold up to a couple thousand liters of spermaceti. But there's more, because that same head contains the largest brain of any animal that has ever existed in the entire long history of life on Earth. It can weigh up to 9 kilograms. To be fair, brain size alone doesn't equal intelligence, and scientists are careful not to jump to sweeping conclusions from that fact. Even so, what this animal does with sound is impressive without any exaggeration at all. The sperm whale drives air through dense folds of tissue at the front of its head. The sound travels backward first, reflects off an air sac near the skull, and only then fires forward as that narrow beam, so the entire head functions as one enormous wind instrument. And here's what that all adds up to in practice. The sperm whale is the loudest animal on the planet. Its clicks reach roughly 230 decibels, and large males also produce a special, relatively rare type of sound known as slow clicks. Deep, heavy, like the muffled strike of something against metal in a total void. These, it seems, are the sounds they use to communicate across vast distances, sending their signals through the dark water to others of their kind that we can't even see. So what we've run into is not a dim-witted carcass, but a creature that literally sees and hears the entire world in a completely different way than we do, and that, believe me, is only the very beginning of this story. For a human being, descending even a few hundred meters underwater is a full-blown expedition requiring advanced preparation, heavy equipment, a safety system, and a very real chance of not coming back. For a sperm whale, those same 200 or 300 meters aren't an achievement or an ordeal. They're a casual warm-up before the real work begins. The deepest dives ever recorded using specialized tracking devices bring the animal to more than 2,000 meters down, into absolute darkness and crushing pressure. And there, in that abyss, it can remain for up to an hour and a half at a stretch without surfacing for a breath of air. For a long time, this sounded like fishermen's exaggeration, until the ocean offered up a completely unexpected piece of evidence. Long before any smart sensors existed, sperm whales were occasionally found tangled in deep-sea cables laid along the seafloor at depths of more than a kilometer. The animals were diving so deep that they were getting caught on wires laid in places we assumed nothing living ever went. Those incidents became some of the first real clues to just how incredibly deep the sperm whale actually dives. It had been leaving us notes from the abyss without meaning to. To survive this, its body has been rebuilt entirely, down to the last detail. A sperm whale's ribcage is designed to collapse under pressure, its lungs compressed to nearly flat. Its heart slows down to conserve every last bit of energy, and its muscles are almost black in color because they're saturated with a special substance that stores oxygen directly within them, like a living reservoir. And here's the most remarkable part. It dives on an exhale, having already let the air out. It doesn't fight the deep or try to force its way through. It simply relaxes into the pressure and lets the depth take it. But even a diver this perfect is still a living, vulnerable creature, and nature reminds us of that in fairly unsparing terms. In sperm whales that stranded for various reasons, researchers have sometimes found damage in the bones that looks strikingly like the kind of injury caused by rapid decompression. In plain terms, If this giant surfaces too quickly due to some misfortune, even it can be hurt, for all its perfectly engineered deep-diving body. And it's into that luminous, self-governed world of the deep that it descends again and again, moving almost blind, listening into the darkness, reading it with its ears, where eyes are no longer any use at all. And now for a thought that's genuinely hard to shake, one worth pausing on. Sperm whales feed deep down, then come up to the surface to defecate, carrying precious iron upward and fertilizing the tiny plants of the plankton. The plankton, in turn, eagerly draws carbon dioxide out of the air. One well-known estimate puts the contribution of southern ocean sperm whales at roughly 200,000 tons of carbon removed from the atmosphere every single year, just through this cycle alone. Think about that for a moment. The very creature we spent centuries calling a sea monster and a killer turns out to function as a vast living pump, quietly cooling our planet and making it just a little more livable for the rest of us. We should also let go of the beloved literary cliché about the epic battle with the giant squid. Yes, giant squid and even colossal squid do appear on its menu, and the round scars from their suckers are found on sperm whale skin, often enough to count as evidence of real underwater fights. But the bulk of its diet is far more mundane. Thousands of mid-sized squid, caught day in and day out. A genuine showdown with a deep-sea giant is a rare exception, not the daily grind that adventure stories love to portray. And once again, nature won't let us forget that even this giant has something to fear. Orcas sometimes attack female sperm whales with small calves, and when that happens, something occurs that sailors used to call a living fortress. The adults form a tight circle, draw the young into the center, face outward, and drive off the attackers with powerful blows from their enormous tails. An entire family becomes a single living wall, holding the line for as long as it takes to protect those who are still too small and too weak to protect themselves. Because here's the real turning point in this whole story. Our sea monster turns out to be a deeply family-oriented creature. Females and their young live in stable, matrilineal groups, recognizing one another year after year and maintaining those bonds for almost the whole of their long lives. Males, once grown, leave their birth group and often live alone, ranging toward the cold waters near the poles and returning only to breed. And when you think about it, that's exactly where the legendary image of the lone giant comes from. It's simply a grown son who left home. The size difference between a large male and a considerably smaller female remains striking and obvious throughout their lives. Their shared care for the young shows up in the most touching small details. When a mother dives deep for food and is gone for a long stretch, her calf isn't left alone. Another member of the group stays with it the whole time, like a hired babysitter. And what's especially remarkable and well documented is that a calf can nurse from females other than its own mother, with other cows willing to share their milk with someone else's young. Sperm whale childhood is long. They're nursed for literally years, and the whales themselves can live to 70 or beyond. Their milk is thick, almost paste-like, because anything thinner would simply dissolve in the water before reaching the calf. And there are scenes that feel almost impossible for an animal this size. Sperm whales sometimes hang alongside one another in the water column for long stretches with no apparent purpose, simply being together. And the way they sleep is extraordinary, upright, arranged in vertical living columns, heads pointing up, drifting into brief naps just a few minutes long. Picture that image. In the dark water, these enormous creatures hanging in silence, sleeping side by side like pillars. And in that moment, nothing is left of the old idea of the dim-witted monster. Beyond the hunting clicks it uses to probe the darkness, the sperm whale has something else, short, rhythmic sequences of sound that researchers call codas. These aren't about finding prey. They're about communication, about talking to one another. And here's what's most striking. Different groups of sperm whales have their own distinct codas, unlike anyone else's. This is where the phenomenon of vocal clans comes from. Whales sharing the same waters can move in separate groups, never mixing, simply because they speak differently, much the way people from different regions are set apart by their accents and dialects. To make this concrete, here's a living example. There's a Caribbean sperm whale clan with its own signature sequence of 5 evenly spaced, identical clicks, something like an acoustic calling card, a quick signal saying, "I'm one of you." And this is where we reach the heart of it, the point that reshapes everything we thought we knew about these animals. That accent isn't present at birth, and it isn't hardwired into the body. A calf learns it, slowly, attentively listening to its mother and the rest of the group, picking up their way of speaking, which means what we're looking at is genuine culture, something passed down not through blood, but through learning, from the older generation to the younger. The most striking proof that sperm whales genuinely learn from one another comes from one of the darker chapters of our shared history. In the 19th century, when whalers were hunting these animals in full force, something remarkable happened. Within just a few years, sperm whales learned to evade their pursuers and change their behavior at the sight of boats. This isn't speculation. When researchers carefully analyzed old ships' logs, they found that the rate of successful harpoon strikes fell by more than half in a very short time. The new survival tactics spread between groups through communication. They literally warned and taught one another, passing the crucial knowledge along through the water. And then, quite recently, something happened that took all of this to another level entirely. Scientists took thousands of recorded codas and ran them through specialized computer algorithms to find out whether any kind of system was present. A system was found. The whale exchanges revealed rhythm and tempo, smooth adjustments in phrasing where one whale seemed to pick up the other's style, and even what could be described as ornamentation, small additions to the signals. All of these elements together produce an enormous number of distinguishable combinations, and scientists, choosing their words with great care, called this a phonetic alphabet. But complete honesty is essential here because it's easy to slip into a beautiful story that isn't quite true. We don't have a translator. Not a single phrase of sperm whale speech has ever been decoded or genuinely understood. We're standing in front of an enormous library packed with books in a completely unknown language. We can already see clearly that this isn't random noise or a meaningless jumble of sounds, that there's structure, order, and rules at work. But we can't open those books and read a single line. We've only just learned to recognize the letters of a foreign script without understanding a single word. And now, the story that perhaps made everything else worth telling. Near the Azores, researchers documented something utterly extraordinary. A group of sperm whales took in an adult bottlenose dolphin, one with a curved, deformed spine that had apparently been rejected and driven out by its own pod. The sperm whales swam alongside this outsider, calmly tolerated its presence, and treated it as though it belonged, as though it truly had a place among them. Really sit with that for a moment. Massive toothed predators from the deep ocean, the very creatures we spent centuries painting as merciless monsters, are looking after a stranger, a weak, disabled dolphin that can offer them absolutely nothing in return. They gain nothing from this, and they take it in anyway. And right in that moment, the monster stops being a monster. It becomes simply a living, social creature that needs, for reasons of its own, to be near someone else, that can't bear to be alone in the cold and the dark. And since we've come this far, we owe it an honest conversation about what we did to it. The spermaceti from inside its head, the organ it uses to perceive the world and speak to its family, we rendered it into the brightest candles money could buy, into precision lubricants for the finest instruments, into creams and ointments for human skin. and the scale of it was never small or ceremonial. It was industrial. First came the American sailing ships out of Nantucket and New Bedford, chasing whales with hand-thrown harpoons. Then, in the 20th century, came enormous factory ships that processed carcasses right there on the open sea. In the span of just a couple of centuries, people killed hundreds of thousands of sperm whales, and by most estimates, somewhere around 1 million were taken across the full history of the hunt. Then, in the middle of the 20th century, illegal hunting with massively falsified catch records added yet another chapter, one of the darkest, and one that went unspoken for a long time. Sperm whale populations collapsed, and they recover agonizingly slowly because these animals take many years to mature and give birth to just one calf every few years. There's no quick way to heal a wound that deep. There's also a stranger, almost fairy tale thread running through this story: ambergris. This extraordinarily rare substance forms in the sperm whale's intestines around the hard beaks of the squid it swallows. Chunks of it drift on ocean currents for years, and when they wash ashore, they're still worth their weight in gold to the perfume industry, which is exactly why they're called floating gold. The chain runs clean from the black depths of the ocean, through the hunt for squid, all the way to an elegant perfume bottle on a vanity table. So the conclusion is simple and honest. The sperm whale didn't suddenly become gentle, and it hasn't stopped being a genuinely formidable animal. But now, alongside the old fear, there's something else: respect. Because what's in front of us isn't a mindless hulk with teeth. It's a creature that perceives an entire world through sound, holds its family close, and communicates in the dark in a language with its own rhythm and its own accent. And maybe all this time, what we were afraid of wasn't a monster at all. It was an alien intelligence we were never able to read, so we melted it down for candles.